Without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Kelly Rossiter, and she will introduce Amy and Shelley. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, Dustin. And thank you everyone for tuning in today for our tour of the Old City of Jerusalem with Shelley and Amy. As Dustin mentioned, I'm Kelly Rossiter, and I was the creator of our Israel and Jordan program for Tauck, which we launched back in 2010. It was actually the first program I ever created for Tauck, where I had recommended that we stay 4 nights in one city. Usually 2 nights, 3 nights, that's normal to see, the highlights. But Jerusalem, there was just so much to experience, even beyond, of course, the important religious significance of the city. Israel is at the crossroads between Europe and Asia and Africa. So you have this incredibly rich and complex historical tapestry to navigate. So I recall winding our way through the cobblestone labyrinth of the old city in Jerusalem and being told that every time you walk up or walk down a set of stairs in the old city, you're essentially traveling forwards or backwards through centuries of time, through history and culture and architecture, because the city was built in these layers, building on top of building, as each kind of conqueror came and went. And that blew my mind. We were definitely going to need someone with expansive knowledge to lead us through the city, which brings me to Shelley, one of my favorite people in the world. We were in the beginning stages of putting together our tour back in 2009, and we're working with the Israeli Ministry of Tourism out of New York, and they recommended the best guides in each city, and Shelley was that person for us. She's brilliant. She has so much love for her city, and she was a huge help in crafting our Jerusalem experience. And thankfully, when you know one great guide, they tend to know another fantastic guide to bring to the table. So Amy joined us a few years later with the same intensity and passion for the many, many layers of history that Jerusalem provides. So I'm so thrilled to have Shelley and Amy with us here today. So without further ado, ladies, take us to Jerusalem.
So I have started to share a screen, and I'm really happy to be able to welcome you to Ben Gurion Airport. For our presentation, then Shelley and I are going to be using a combination of 360-degree photography and stills along the way to be able to kind of highlight our point. So for those who have been, this is the entrance into the airport, and I'm just going to turn you around so you can see the type of photography. It says "Welcome to Israel" on the outside. And I'm just going to stop here for a second and show you a little bit around before we get going. So welcome in English, Bruchim Habaim, or welcome in Hebrew as well. So this is definitely a reminder that we're here at the airport entering into the land of Israel, and we're going to be heading up to Jerusalem very, very soon. So above us, there's some mosaics that remind us of the ancient history. Before we get going into Jerusalem itself, I just want to give a moment of map orientation. So I'm just going to use a couple of maps to show you that we are in the Middle East. And of course, this is Israel here in the orange in the middle. So it says Israel in the middle there. If we went north of us, then we get into Europe. If we go south of us, we get into Africa. And if we go east of us, we get into the Middle East and then eventually into Asia. And so this place, Israel, functions in a lot of ways as a land bridge between all of these continents, and Israel is really influenced by all of the different cultures, the geology, the geography, the flora, the fauna, you name it. We are influenced by all of the nations that are around us and all of the cultures that are around us, making Israel a really, really unique place. So I'm going to show you another map here for just a second so that you can understand that although we refer to this airport as the Tel Aviv airport, Tel Aviv is on the coast and we're currently in the middle. Okay, we're in between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and we're going to be heading up, even though it looks like we're going down, but this is a physical upward towards Jerusalem in just another moment. So now that you have this sort of sense, I'm going to kind of give you a sense of the geography here. From Israel's north to its south, you can drive in about 7.5 hours. If you wanted to drive from the east to the west points here, it's like about 1.5 hours. So this country is absolutely tiny. We actually measure our space here in millimeters. That is to say that everyone has something to say about every millimeter of all of the land that we're looking at around here. But having said that, we actually measure our history in millennia. That is to say that we measure it in thousands of years, and that's what Shelley and I are going to be talking about as we come through here. Now, if you're already coming up with questions, just note that we'll answer those questions at the end, at the Q&A part. So you can keep sending them, but we'll answer them at the end. So now that you've had a chance to see where Jerusalem is, where Tel Aviv is, and understand that we're coming up here into the middle, then I am going to take us forward into our all the way up to the road to Jerusalem. So we're going to head from where we are now from the airport, and we're going to head up to Jerusalem. So you're just starting to see the initial buildings of Jerusalem itself, and yet another sign that says welcome in front of you. I just wanted to be able to use this scene to be able to show you that we're actually on a physical incline. So we're on our way up here, and let me just turn you so you can see that we've actually come from this valley down below. So coming from this valley down below reminds us that we came from the airport and we're on a physical ascension to Jerusalem. But always when we go to Jerusalem, it's also a spiritual ascent. So it's both a physical and a spiritual ascent. And that's because of the nature of Jerusalem being so important to so many different people and religions through history. So next, we're going to take a leap from the entrance of the current day city, and we're going to go take a leap to the entrance to the old city. So let's go ahead here. Okay, so I'm just going to let this move really, really slowly. So it's, again, because of tech issues around here, sometimes it looks like it's jerking, but it's just moving really, really slowly to show you the old city walls that are in front of us. So right in front of us is the entrance to the old city. This part over here is known as Jaffa Gate, and it is named for the port city of Jaffa that is near Tel Aviv. And that has always been the historic entry point into the land of Israel, or the Holy Land, throughout its thousands of years of history. So this gate actually faces the road that leads to Jaffa, and that's how it got its name. So in addition to that, the old city walls that are in front of us, you're starting to see that they're actually a really long set of walls. In kilometers, the old city fits inside about 1 square kilometer. In miles, I believe that's around 0.66, but I was never like one for math. That's how I became a tour guide, so it's all going to work out. In terms of in front of you, this citadel that you're looking at right now is actually known as the Tower of David. So if we're already going to mention David and about the connection to David, then I made you a little cartoon so you could see him. And King David is the person that we credit with establishing Jerusalem as the capital at the time of the Jewish people about 3,000 years ago. When David conquered the city 3,000 years ago, he eventually is going to create a city here, not where we're standing, but farther down the hill, because King David faced a very big challenge with water. And so he needed to choose the area where the spring was sitting. Now, having said that, for many, many years, people have been referring to this section in front of us as the Tower of David. But I just said to you that David didn't establish the city here. So how did it get this nickname? The Tower of David, this whole section here, has gotten this nickname by a mistake in history. It turns out that when the Crusaders came here about 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years after David, what they found was the remains of a citadel on basically the highest hill in the neighborhood, and they assumed that it must have been from David. And so they start using the terminology, the Tower of David, and from then, it becomes known as the Tower of David, and no amount of historians or archaeologists or tour guides, for that matter, can convince anybody to call it anything other than the Tower of David. So if David didn't build this, then who did? It turns out that 1,000 years after the time of David, there was a different king, a king called Herod, and he's the one who really established this site, and it has been built and rebuilt since the time of Herod, and that was about 2,000 years ago. So again, King David is 3,000 years ago, Herod is 2,000 years ago, and the Crusaders are 1,000 years ago. We have nothing if not history around here. So as I said, this is the Tower of David, even though David didn't establish it, and it really is the opening section of going into the Old City. Now, before we enter the Old City, I'm just going to show you behind you that we're right at the meeting point between the old and the new. Let's put it in the frame. So the old on the left and the new in front of us. We were just talking with Kelly and with Shelley about the fact that they got mixed up at some point about a meeting place between these two hotels, the King David Hotel here and the Citadel of David here, because everything in this city is named after David. We always go back and recognize David's establishment of the city. So this is the King David up above. This is the Citadel, and just behind it is the Waldorf Astoria, where Shelley and I absolutely love to meet our Tauck groups. I don't know if they're still going to be staying there, but you never know. But usually we walk along this whole pathway to be able to come over here to meet our groups and enter into the city along this street that's just down below us. So now that you've seen that part of it, we're going to turn around again and see that you're in front of us. This is the Jaffa Gate. I'm just going to give you a picture of the gate itself so you can see that actually the entrance is from the side, not right in front of us. I know that the tree is hiding that a little bit, but we're about to move closer. So having said all of this, let us move a little bit closer to the gate. and take a look about where we are. So I'm going to turn you around so you can see where we came from. Just a moment ago, we're standing in this plaza. Now, most of our 360-degree photography has come in from pre-COVID. That's why you can see all these people here. Today, it's actually very, very quiet for the most part, and you see only people in masks and that kind of thing. So this was the Tower of David that we saw a minute ago, and this is the entrance to the gate itself, and we're about to go and stand right next to the gate. So let's move forward. Now, in fact, the walls that we're looking at right now were not established by David, not established by Herod, but actually these current walls were established about 500 or so years ago under Suleiman the Magnificent. By then, the Ottoman Empire had taken over in this land. So you're starting to understand that between David and now, we've had many, many, many conquerors of Jerusalem. And so the most recent, if you will, of the conquerors that built walls, at least, were the Ottomans. At the end of the Ottoman Empire, that was around World War I. And so what ended up happening is by then we're already in the modern era, and therefore you don't really need walls to protect the city in the same way, because by then firearms are sort of working differently. So no other conquerors post-Ottomans ever really rebuilt, if you will, the walls in their entirety. So we're going to head into the Old City now. By the way, of course, the most recent of the people that now control the Old City, of course, are the Jewish community from 1967. And here is a mezuzah, which is a Jewish symbol reminding us of the current Jewish nature, at least in part of the Old City itself. So I'm going to turn us around so you can see that this gate that was built by Suleiman the Magnificent is a really fantastic gate. The entrance is behind us. And then to our left is the way that we get into the Old City. So this is a turning gate that reminds us of the amount of that Suleiman the Magnificent at the time invested in trying to defend the city. And if I turn this to the side where this Begala guy is, then that's me there in the corner, just waving to you guys and welcoming you to Jerusalem. I also wanted to use this moment to actually go back to our ancient texts, to our biblical texts. So I pulled up Psalm 122, a song of ascents of David. And the reason I like this one is because of the part that I've highlighted here in the middle of the screen. It says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels." I love this psalm, and I often read it to our guests here in this place because I really love the idea that we come in with the same prayer on our lips that's been credited to David for 3,000 years, which is to say, let there be peace within the walls and security within the citadels. At this point, this is a city that is dedicated not just to Jewish community, but also to the Christian community and also to the Muslim community that live here. And so 3 different religions reside within the 4 quarters that we're going to be exploring during our tour today. So I'm going to head inside the city. The gate is behind us. Let me show you where we came from. So there's Jaffa Gate behind us. That's where we were standing. And now we're going to head straight into the city. We're in the Jaffa Gate Plaza. That's the citadel that's up next to us. The Tower of David is right up next to us. And we're going to go around the corner. Let's head around the corner. So let me show you where we came from. This is the corner that we came around. And we're still right next to that Tower of David. And when next we land, in just a moment, we're going to be up by these flags. So I'm going to show you in a second that this road here leads into the area that's sort of the direction of the Armenian and the Jewish quarter. And I'm going to give you an overlook when we go up above in about 10 seconds. So I'm heading up here next. So now that you've had a chance to see a little bit around you from below, let's go up above. Okay, this again is the view facing to the west. So here is again the King David Hotel that I mentioned earlier. The 3 flags that you're seeing are the flag of Jerusalem, the flag of Israel, and actually the Tower of David where we are is a current day museum, and it also has its own flag. So it gets a little flag of its own. We love this rooftop. Me and Shelly are often up here with our guests, and it's, I think, one of our favorite places. Maybe I'm speaking for Shelly, she'll tell you herself, but I love it up here. Shelly says yes. All right, so I'm going to turn you all the way around. We were facing west, but now we're facing east. So I want to give you an overview on this incredible view that's at our feet right now. So we're on the tower up above, and we're looking downhill. I know that the perspective doesn't always help you understand that that's the case, but we really are looking downhill. On the horizon here, this is the Mount of Olives. Our tour today is going to end at the Mount of Olives, so I'll leave that for a little bit later in terms of its importance. If I come down the hill from the Mount of Olives, the first thing I hit is actually the Kidron Valley, And then from the Kidron Valley, I ascend to this area in front of us, which is known as the Temple Mount or the Dome of the Rock. All of us have put some version of that in our virtual backgrounds of ourselves today, so you can also see it behind us. But the dome here, I made it a little bit bigger so you could see it. So the Dome of the Rock is a site that is of Islamic importance that sits on top of the Temple Mount, which is important actually in all three religions. So we're going to go visit there a little bit later in our tour. Just next to it here is the Muslim quarter. Okay, so just all of this section is the Muslim quarter. And if I come uphill from the Muslim quarter, then I hit the Christian quarter here. Okay, so the Christian quarter is anchored by these two domes, which in fact are the domes of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I made them a little bit bigger so you can see them just a bit easier here. So the two domes of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that is the site that recognizes the site of the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And Shelley's going to bring us there a little later. So we have the Muslim quarter at the bottom, the Christian quarter at the top. If you walk along the same kind of level at the top of the hill here as the Christian quarter, we get to the Armenian quarter. So Shelley's going to take us here really, really soon. Just a second when I'm done, and she's going to take you guys into this church and head down into the Armenian quarter. And of course, the last quarter here is this one here, which is the Jewish quarter, which stretches from here all the way down towards the Temple Mount and the Western Wall, which we'll also visit in our tour. So here is the anchor point, if you will, of the Jewish quarter is this building known as the Hurva Synagogue. And the Hurva Synagogue, as I said, it's this white dome that was sort of hidden behind the trees. And Shelley's going to bring us there a little bit later. So here is the site here. So just before I send you to Shelley, then I want to show you one map that will hopefully orient all of us into the right directions. Now, my map is oriented in the same direction that we're looking. That is to say that north is pointing to the left, because in front of us, both when our vision and this map is pointing to the east. So the top of the map is east. So now you can a little bit more clearly see the different quarters: the Temple Mount, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, and the Jewish quarter. Now, Shelley's going to answer the question of how the Armenians have their own quarter when she starts with you in just a second. And our pathway today is going to take us from where we are at the number 1, which is at Jaffa Gate, through the Armenian quarter, down to the Jewish quarter. I'm going to take you up to the Temple Mount. Shelley's going to take us along the Via Dolorosa through the Muslim quarter and into the Christian quarter, where she'll tell the story of Christianity. And then I'll take you guys back out from this gate, Lion's Gate, up to the Mount of Olives. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it to Shelley. Shelley, unmute. Unmute, Shelley.
Okay, great. Great to see everybody. I'm going to just put my screen up. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Amy, for that great introduction. And we are about to start walking to the Armenian quarter. And actually, if I show you, we are coming from this direction, and maybe it's a 5-minute walk from the Tower of David, where Amy just took you. And we're about to enter the main compound in the Armenian quarter, and that is where we have St. James Cathedral. So let's enter. The Armenian quarter, by the way, is the smallest of the quarters. This is the front of the St. James Cathedral. I'll just give you a bit of a walk around. And I know frequently the question comes up, Armenians are Christian, so why do they have their own quarter? Well, back in the year 301, I'll just interrupt just to show you, because the Armenians are known for their wonderful, wonderful ceramics. So here, just to get a little bit of a glimpse of Mary and the baby Jesus in the Armenian ceramics. And we pass a lot of these shops all around. Anyway, the Armenians in the year 301 were the first nation to accept Christianity as a whole nation. And we know for sure a century later, they already established themselves in this area. And they say probably even before. So in other words, they have been here for a very, very long time, and hence they have their own quarter. It's a very small quarter, as I said, and really the smallest of the quarters. But let's head inside just for a minute, just to get a little bit of a feel for this fascinating, very different looking, I think, church cathedral. It has a very, shall we say, mystic Eastern flavor to it, with the beautiful tile work and the bright carpet. And it's called the St. I'll move around slowly. It's called the St. James Cathedral because James the Great, or James the Greater, who was one of the followers of Jesus, they say he was beheaded here. by Herod Agrippa. That was the grandson of Herod the Great in the year 44 AD. And his head is buried inside this chapel. Where is his body? Well, his body is somewhere in Spain. Now, if we take a look up at the beautiful skylight, this chapel or cathedral is lit by, one second, let me just get us down a bit. It's lit by natural light, as well as all these beautiful oil lanterns. But we're going to continue on out of the church. Okay, and we are here on a street, Ararat Road. Now, there are no, and sometimes people ask this, there are no borders or gates between the different quarters. You can flow from one quarter to the next. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes the name of the street will give you an idea of where we are. So first of all, where is Mount Ararat? Today, Mount Ararat is in Turkey, but it was once in Armenia. Now, what do we know about Mount Ararat? Here's the name again, Mount Ararat. What do we know? Well, according to tradition, this is where Noah's Ark docked. And so for the Armenians who really have very strong connections with Mount Ararat, they have also very, very strong connections with the story of Noah and the Ark. And from here, though, we're going to be heading into the Jewish quarter. Let me just give you a little bit more view of this corner. Here we go. And we're going to be following pretty much the guy there who's in the t-shirt. Okay, but before we do, let me pull up this map again because it's marked. Okay, and again, so here we are, the Armenian quarter. We're heading now into the Jewish quarter. So let's head over there now. One second. Okay, so we're now in the Jewish quarter. However, if you look around, well, these are ancient columns, and we come down a number of steps to get to them. So we're below ground level in the Jewish quarter. And where are we? Well, I'd like to say that we're on Fifth Avenue, we're on the Champs-Élysées, Unter den Linden, or Main Street. In other words, this is what's called a cardo. It was a main north-south access road in ancient times and a major shopping street. So let's turn around a bit and we can actually see two of these ancient shops. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see it. And, whoops, sorry. One second, let me get you back. Apologize for that. Okay, let's go to those shops. And what would they have been selling in these shops? Well, it could have been fabric. It could have been anything like, I would say, spices, textile, you name it, okay? Now, obviously, the people selling here have been on, shall we say, a 1,500-year-old coffee break, so we can't really buy anything from them. But this cardo, which really, if we're talking the heart of the city, is a Roman Byzantine cardo. And we have a large percentage of it, so let's just go to our next, continue on in the cardo. This is a still shot. Part of the cardo is covered, so here we are in the covered part. Now, most of the archaeological finds were discovered post-1967, and as Amy began talking about, in between 1948 and 1967, 1948 was the War of Independence, and during those 19 years, this area, the old city, was under Jordanian control. Jerusalem was a divided city. So this was under Jordanian control. Comes 1967, when Israel reunites, liberates, conquers, pick whichever term you're more comfortable with. This is now under Jewish control, and the archaeologists come here and they begin digging, and they dig and they dig and they find amazing find. Let's just move up a little closer because we have this wonderful mural here that's a fairly modern mural, just to give us, though, a feel for what it was like here 1,500 or years ago. And there would have been, you can say they're selling pottery. There would have been even money changers. People do come to buy souvenirs even 1,500 years ago. And what's really nice here is this little in the corner where my cursor is going around. We have a little girl from, ancient times, 1,500 years ago, maybe even earlier, meeting up with a modern boy, and she's offering him a pomegranate, and he's either on his way home from school or heading over to school. Now, the Cardo, as I mentioned, is 1,500 years old. Well, we have even many older sites, and let's head to one of them right now. So the site that we're looking at now is what's called the Broad Wall, and the Broad Wall goes back 2,700 years. We're talking First Temple period. We're talking the time of King Hezekiah. Now, this doesn't look like a very imposing wall, but the original height was over here. That's 8 meters, okay? So it was very, very high, very long. He built it. He built a number of projects, but he built it to protect the city from the oncoming Assyrians who were threatening to destroy the city, and they didn't succeed. And what's amazing about this wall, because perhaps if you're looking at it, doesn't look that impressive, is that it has been dated, and it's been dated to that time. And this wall is mentioned in the Bible, both in the book of Chronicles as well as in the book of Isaiah. And we are now going to be heading in the direction of the main square in the Jewish quarter. And I'm going to take a short walk around in case it hasn't come up on your screen yet. We're going to take a very short walk around the square. The name of this square is Horva Square, and I'll explain the name in a moment. Now, if you notice, all the buildings here are very modern, and that's again because they were all built post-1967, most of them built in the 1970s. By the way, today the Jewish quarter is mostly inhabited by not only, but mostly religious Jews. Now, we have a huge synagogue, and Amy actually showed you a view of the synagogue from a different angle earlier. The name of the synagogue is the Horva Synagogue. Now, what does that mean? The Horva actually means the ruins. Now, why would you name a modern synagogue, right? It doesn't look like a ruin, as well as a modern square, the ruins? Well, of course, there's a story behind it. In the year 1700, a group of 300 Jews, they come here from Eastern Europe, and they have to borrow money, and they build a modest synagogue. Well, 21 years later, that synagogue was destroyed when they couldn't return the debt. It remains a ruin, and it becomes a ruin until well over 100 years later, when a new, much larger synagogue is built, looking very similar to the synagogue that we see here today. However, what happens? On May 27, 1948, on the eve of the Jordanian or the Arab legions taking over of the Jewish quarter, the synagogue is destroyed once again, and it remained a memorial site for many years until the decision was to rebuild it, again, very much using the model from over 150 years ago. So hence, this synagogue is 2,010 years old, it goes back to the year 2010. And what I'd like to show you now is, this is a still, but this is what sits today in front of the Horva Synagogue. And what you're looking at is a candelabrum, but what we would call in Hebrew, a menorah. And let me get you closer to the menorah. And a menorah, this is believed to be, by many, not all, there's a whole debate about that, of how the candelabrum or the menorah looked when it stood in the Second Temple. In those days, it would have been solid gold. Today, it's gold-plated, but that's also okay. If you notice, it has 7 branches. That is for the 7 days of the week, and the center branch, okay, is for the Sabbath. Some of you might say, but wait a minute, we're familiar with what's called a Hanukkah menorah, what we light on the Jewish festival of lights on Hanukkah, and that is 9 branches where you light 8 candles and a center branch, which is the helper. And that is because of a miracle that took place, again, 2,200 years ago. But again, this is the candelabrum or the menorah going back to the time of the temple and perhaps how it looked. And this happens to be a photo that I really like, so I just decided to show it. I took it, I don't know, it's really quiet. This was during COVID times. But here, what I'd like to show you is this is the symbol of the state of Israel. Israel was established in 1948, and a year later, this was voted on as a symbol. And in the center, you can see here the candelabrum, and it's surrounded by olive branches being a symbol of peace. The name of Israel in Hebrew, Yisrael, and this is our symbol. Now, the candelabrum is an ancient symbol. You'll find it on ancient synagogues. Matter of fact, one of the ways of identifying an ancient site is if you see something like a candelabrum, a menorah, you'll know that that is a Jewish site. And what is still the connection? Why was it chosen? Well, some of you might have been to Rome. We're over in Rome now. And perhaps some of you have been to the Forum in Rome. And if you've been to the Forum in Rome, perhaps the Arch of Titus. Now, who was Titus? Titus was the Roman commander who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in the year 70 AD. So we're talking over 2,000 years ago. Now, the Romans, they love victory arches, and it was actually Titus's brother who had this victory arch erected. And what do we see here? We see Jews being led away as slaves to Rome after the temple is destroyed. And you see the Romans taking the booty, including the candelabrum. So we have 2 messages here. One of them is that our years of exile are over, and hence the choice of the candelabrum, and a candelabrum to bring light not only to us, but to the rest of the world. Before we move on from this site, I'd like to just take you just on a quick little visit. Sorry, we're going to move on. Into the Horva synagogue. And what you're looking at directly in front of you is what's called a huge ark. Behind the velvet curtains are the Torah scrolls. What are the Torah scrolls? Those are the 5 books of Moses. So we're talking Genesis through Deuteronomy, and portions are read every Sabbath, Shabbat, that's our holiest day of the year. And smaller portions are read on Monday and on Thursday, and also on holidays. So let's just take a little bit of a walk around here through the synagogue. They incorporated some of the older part. Now, if you look at the synagogue, all these seats are for men. What can I tell you? This is an Orthodox synagogue, in other words, a religious synagogue, and there's separate seating for men and women. So where are women? They're up here in the balcony. So what can I tell you? That's what it is. Okay, so we're going to leave the synagogue right now through the doors, and we're going to be going really, I would say, to the central place, not only for Jews, but for many, many visitors to Jerusalem. So we're going to be heading now down to the Western Wall, the Kotel, but let me bring up the map just to get an idea again. Armenian Quarter, the Jewish Quarter, and we're heading really to the border of the Temple Mount, and that is where we'll be going now to the western wall. So let's continue down. We have to go down a number of stairs. By the way, they're building an elevator. So we hope that by the time you get to visit here, the elevator will be ready. We do go through some security. It's usually 1, 2, 3. And here we are down at the western wall. I'm just going to do a little bit of a walk around. By the way, if you take a look at the bridge up here, that is the bridge for visitors to go up to the Temple Mount, and Amy will be taking you up to the Temple Mount very, very soon. The Western Wall, which is a place that attracts not only Jews, but so many visitors who come here. And people will come here to touch the stones, to pray at the stone, to leave a message in the stone. I will talk about that soon. And for many people who come here, especially Jews, they'll come to mourn the destruction, and hence perhaps the name that many people are familiar, the Wailing Wall. But many people come here to pray for either a redemption or for better, more peaceful times. And for others, it is just a strong historical link between 2,000 years ago and today of our presence here. Now, the Western Wall functioned as an open-air Orthodox synagogue. So as I spoke to you before, separate areas for men and women. So this is the women's section. There's a divider. And over here is the men's section. If you notice, the men's section is larger than the women's section, but we won't go there right now. What is the direction of prayer for Jews around the world? And here, because I really want to stress the centrality of Jerusalem for Jews everywhere pray in the direction of the Temple Mount, in the direction of the Western Wall. Obviously, if you're out of the country, you'll pray in the direction of Israel. If you're in Israel, you'll pray in the direction of Jerusalem. But if you're in Jerusalem and it's generally facing east, you will pray in this direction, just to give you a sense of its centrality. And I'm just going to walk you around just the whole area around the Temple Mount. I still haven't really explained, though, what actually is the Temple Mount, because people come here and they say, oh, it's a part of the second temple. Well, I have to tell you, this second temple was completely destroyed, and I'm going to explain. I'm going to put up a screenshot, and it's just now, to explain what actually is the temple, what is the Western Wall. So what we're looking at here is how we believe the entire Temple Mount platform looked 2,000 years ago. Now, Amy's going to take you up there, and I can assure you it looks very, very different. First of all, where are we? We're on Mount Moriah. It's here that Abraham will take his son Isaac for the binding of Isaac. It's going to be here that 3,000 years ago, King Solomon will build a first temple, which was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC, and a second temple, which was built in a number of stages. But this is in its most glorious stage. In the center, this is the temple building. This was built by Herod the Great, and we're talking the 1st century BC. The front room in the front of the temple had the implements of worship, and that would have included the candelabrum that we talked about. Now, the temple platform is surrounded by retaining walls, essentially to hold it up, because it is sitting on a hill. But we still haven't gotten to the explanation about the Western Wall. So let's go on to the next shot. Takes a second to load up. Today we have the full length. This is the Western retaining wall we were looking at before from an Eastern view. As a matter of fact, the view you looked at before would have been the view that you would have had from the Mount of Olives. And for those for whom this will resonate, that would have been the view Jesus would have had when he came down the Mount of Olives. But now this is the Western Wall. As I said, we have the full length of the Western Wall, but most of it is underground. So what I've marked in red here, this just little portion, that is the Western Wall Prayer Plaza. But why are we praying here and not at the eastern wall or not the northern or southern wall? It has to do again with the holiness of the site. And let's go back up here to the temple, because in the back room of the temple, there was a room called the Holy of Holies. Now, what was in this room? Many people will say, the Ark of the Covenant. And that would have been a right answer for the first temple, for Solomon's temple. But with its destruction, the Ark of the Temple has been lost. There is a monk in Ethiopia. He claims he's guarding it, but we really don't know. But as far as we know, it has been lost to history. In the Second Temple period, then what was in this room? Well, physically, it was an empty room, but it was believed to be the place of the resting place of the divine presence, making it, and still today, the holiest spot in the world for Jews. Who was allowed in there? No one, except for one day out of the year, the high priest, he would go in there on our holiest day. Our holiest day is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. He would go in to atone for the sins of Israel. And of all the walls, the western wall is the closest to the Holy of Holies. So let's head back just for another minute, back to the western wall. And here you have a close-up view, and I purposely made it close up because I want to show you all these little notes. You can see the white around the stone. By the way, these stones were hand chiseled 2,000 years ago, and it took 10 years to build the whole complex, and it was done 10,000 workers. But about the white borders, these are tiny little notes. And people, when they come to the walls, and I'm talking Jews and non-Jews, really everyone who comes here likes to write a little note, and we always give out paper to our guests to write maybe a wish or a prayer. And I said visitors from abroad, even the most famous, will come here, including actors and politicians. But here, I'm going to blow this up a bit, this scene. And we have here, okay, in the year 2000, Pope John Paul II, he was here on a visit, and he too left a note in the wall. So just to get a little bit of a sense of the various people who come here, again, from the religious to non-religious to non-Jews. Here we have a tourist taking a picture. Will all come here. And again, I want to stress the centrality of Jerusalem to Judaism. On many occasions, even on very, very happy occasions, we say a phrase from the book of Psalms. We say it at weddings. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. If I do not remember you, Jerusalem, if I do not set you above my highest joy. So this area is the holiest spot. Now, in honesty, the holiest spot for Jews would really be on top of the Temple Mount, but Jews have not been praying there for 2,000 years. That's why we use the Western Wall. And at this point, I'm going to hand the mic or whatever, the baton, over to Amy, who's going to take you up to the Temple Mount, and then I will continue afterwards.
Oh, this is super fun. I get a chance to hear Shelley, who normally is guiding in parallel to me. So this is great. I love this. Great. Okay, so from my, sorry. That's not what I meant to do. Hold on for a second. I'm going to fix my stuff, and then I'm going to send it back to you guys. There we go. That's what I meant to do. Great. Okay, so we're looking now just north, okay? So just to our left down below. So you see this wall over here? The down below that was where the Western Wall was, where we just left Shelley. So we've actually come up above the Western Wall onto the platform that Shelley started to explain, which was created by Herod about 2,000 years ago. And now our focus is going to shift from the Jewish connection, and we're going to understand the Islamic connection while we're here on top of the Temple Mount. So the Temple Mount is now home to what you can see in front of you, which is the Dome of the Rock. And behind us, we can see that there's actually a really large mosque over here. So the mosque is reminding us, and the dome, that this is a connection to Islam, and that is where it stands today. So while it might have started off in one format, then we're going to try to understand the connection to various periods of history. So if we think about the fact that Muhammad was born in the 6th century in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, then by the time the year 610 comes around, he is going to begin to get insight from God, which will eventually be written down as the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Among other things that's going to happen is that he will come on a journey about a decade or so later, and that journey is known as the night journey. The night journey has Muhammad coming on a kind of a special winged beast, if you will, known as El Barak, and that will bring him to what is known in the Quran as the farthest place. He will come from Mecca all the way to the farthest place, which Islam will eventually understand and recognize as being Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, he will arrive here at sort of the southern end of the mountaintop and where we are. And then he will then, in the middle, ascend to the heavens to discuss with God what Islam will look like. He ascends to the heavens from the peak of the mountain. I know it looks like we're on a platform, but I promise we're on a mountaintop. The mountaintop in Jewish tradition is known as Mount Moriah, but now it's become known as the Temple Mount because of what has happened since then. And from the peak of the mountain, Muhammad ascends to the heavens, and while he's in the heavens, he discusses with God what the tenets of Islam will really look like. Among other things that is decided is that Muslims will pray 5 times a day. The direction of prayer will eventually become towards Mecca, which is where Muhammad's birthplace is and where Islam really gets its birth. It will also have a sort of a secondary birth, if you will, which is in 622 when they move from Mecca to Medina. So actually Mecca is the first holiest site in Islam. Medina is the second holiest site, but Jerusalem is the third holiest site, because it is in this place that Muhammad discusses with God, as I said, ascends to the heavens to discuss with God what Islam will look like. Eventually, there's going to become 5 pillars of Islamic faith. So now that we've sort of understood that, I'm actually going to bring us closer to this fountain for a moment. One of the pillars of faith is the idea of prayer itself. So this fountain is just reminding us that prayer actually begins with stopping and taking into account just for a second the differentiation between the outside world and the spiritual world. So Muslims traditionally wash. So you can see spigots all the way around this fountain and little benches for people to sit on, and you're meant to wash your feet, your hands, your face, the top of your head, with the idea being that it is both a spiritual and a physical cleansing. Physical cleansing, it's obvious, you want to get rid of the worldly dirt, but it also has a chance for people to have a spiritual cleansing before they enter the space of prayer. Now, Muslims can pray on their own, on a prayer mat that separates them from the ground, but if at all possible, Muslims should go and pray in a mosque. So here's the mosque, and we're also going to head into the mosque. Now, generally speaking, in addition to washing, then you also take your shoes off because the mosque is covered with carpet and you leave, again, the worldly dirt on the outside. So I'm just going to give you a pan around here for a moment so you can see the enormity of this place inside here. I'm not even sure that this picture does it justice. Now, this is a Muslim holy site. So actually this photography is giving us a chance to do something that we actually can't do when we're here in person, because currently these sanctified sites are closed to visitors. We don't go inside the buildings when we're in person, but we are lucky to be able to do this virtually today to be able to get a sense of the inside. So as I said, Muslims pray 5 times a day, and if possible in a mosque. Friday is the holy day for Muslims as opposed to Saturday for the Jewish community and Sunday for Christianity. So on Fridays in particular, you'll find that people are coming to this particular mosque. And you can see the carpets actually have individual places for each person to do their own prayers, because part of Muslim prayer has to do, again, with supplicating yourself to God. If you look at the architecture that's above us, you'll start to notice this kind of interlocking colors. For example, it's called ablak. The idea being that this is a very Middle Eastern style that you're seeing around here, but you're also starting to see that Islam doesn't really have graven images. That is to say that you don't really find pictures of people or of animals, and that is to focus your attention on God and the relationship with God. One of the other pillars of faith is that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah, and Allah is the only God. Allah is just the word for God in Arabic, but it's the same God as every place else. But you can start to see again, like these interiors that are decorated with both calligraphy, with tiles, with, you know, everything that sort of makes this just this enormous space. So as we mentioned a second ago, Shelley explained earlier that the Jewish tradition is to pray towards the Temple Mount. The Islamic tradition, as I mentioned, is to pray towards Mecca. So now you can see a prayer niche which shows us the direction of Mecca. And right next to it is a pulpit for the imam, which functions like a prayer leader, like a priest or a rabbi, to stand next to it and perhaps give a sermon. And so again, this is just one example of one of the many amazing things that we can find on the Temple Mount. We're going to head to the middle of the Temple Mount now. So I'm just going to show you where we were so you can see where we've come. Okay, so the mosque is all the way down here behind us. And we are taking a look for a moment at the Golden Dome, which I think is unbelievable. I mean, for me at least, it's one of the most beautiful sights. All of us, me, Dustin, Shelley, all of us chose virtual backgrounds because the Golden Dome, it's, first of all, it's eye-catching and amazing. Here, I'll move my head as well. With the idea being that it's, I think, a real touch point for all of us to be able to look at this site. So we're really looking in many ways at the peak of the mountain. If I go back to the beginnings in many ways of everything, then the Jewish tradition is that this site that we're looking at is actually the foundation stone of the world. That is to say that from here, God takes the dirt of the world and creates the world from here. Another tradition says that Adam and Eve were created from the dirt of this space in front of us. Yet another tradition places the biblical story of the binding of Isaac happening here in this spot. Of course, you heard about the Solomonic temple that was built here 3,000 years ago and the Herodian temple that was built here 2,000 years ago. Those are all Jewish traditions. But today, this is an Islamic site that in front of us reminds us of the ascension of Muhammad into the heavens. And these sites were actually built less than 100 years after the arrival of Muhammad here. And so just a little bit later in history, then another caliph comes along and builds both the mosque that was behind us and this, which actually is a shrine in front of us. And again, here you can see the white marble around the bottom, these geometric tiles, the calligraphy here, and of course, the gold itself on the top. And we're always attracted to, of course, to this gold color. You should know, by the way, that the gold is a more recent addition. It actually started off as a wooden dome, and eventually it will get changed out several times in its history. At certain points, it was kind of copper, which kind of had a patina of green on it. And then most recently, the King of Jordan donated actual gold to be able to cover the gold dome on top of it. And again, I think it's, for me at least, one of the most amazing and impressive sites. So we don't, as I said, when we're actually here in person, we just look at it from the outside, but with the amazing amount of technology that we have available to us now, then we're actually looking from underneath that dome. So we're underneath the golden part, and you can again see that interlocking colors up above. But I know this is a funny view, but I promise you that the reason we're looking at this is that this is the actual foundation stone in front of you. So from Islamic tradition, this is the site from which Muhammad ascends to the heavens. From this location here, he ascends to the heavens. And one tradition says that Mount Moriah was so reluctant to give up Muhammad into the heavens that the mountain actually rose up. So it's actually unclear if during the period of the temples that preceded it, whether or not this was really a rocky outcropping or not. But Muhammad eventually does descend from the heavens and will return to Mecca to continue the rise of Islam around him. So having understood the Islamic connection to the city, then what we're going to do is we're going to turn around and we're going to head sort of towards that door. I should also mention before we go that this site, although it's a shrine, and it's not specifically designated as a mosque, it actually functions like a mosque. That is to say that people come and pray here. So the same thing that happens in a mosque happens here. That is to say people wash outside, you leave your shoes outside, and then you can come in here along the carpets, and you will often find people praying inside the mosque. It hasn't always been closed inside the shrine. It hasn't always been closed, by the way, to history. It's a more recent thing, and it has to do, again, with maintaining the religious sanctity of the site and ensuring its security as well, because obviously these are all secure issues. I'm going to head us off the Temple Mount. This is the exit to the Temple Mount over there. This is an exit known as the Cotton Merchants Market, which is to say that when it was built here hundreds of years ago, then this was often a place you would find cotton merchants selling their wares. Today, actually, it's like quite a nice cute little market right now. The photography is showing it to us when it's a bit closed. But you can find all sorts of crazy things here, tchotchkes of every sort. We're often telling our Tauck guests, we don't have time for shopping, but they have time when they're not with us. We just have too many things to say, so we don't let them shop when we're with them. But when they're done, they go shopping. Don't worry. If you come on the tour, you could go shopping. We're going to go out of this corridor and we're going to turn right. And I'm going to show you one last thing before I send you to Shelley. Okay, so we came from here. So we're actually looking back in the same direction that we came from. That is to say, up above us is the Temple Mount. Okay, so this direction up above us is the Temple Mount. And we're kind of in a valley. And Shelley's going to explain that in a second as she heads us towards. I just want to show you that we're next to one of the best hummus places. It's called Abu Shukri. It's really, really fantastic hummus. I often have an argument with our Bethlehem guide about who has the best hummus, and we say we do. So before I send you to Shelley, then I'm just going to show you that we're at the corner of this valley street, and I'm going to show you a map. Now, I know we showed you this map oriented differently earlier, so I apologize if it's confusing, but we want to make sure we're consistent. And that is to say that the map now is oriented so that the south is at the top because it's the direction that we're looking in. Because here is the Temple Mount and it was up above us, and we're over here in this section now. Okay, so the Temple Mount is to our left, as in above like these buildings, and I'll show you again, like behind Abu Shukri is where the Temple Mount is. So far, you've come from Jaffa Gate, and we did the Armenian quarter, we did the Jewish quarter, we looked at the Al-Aqsa Mosque up above, we looked at the Dome of the Rock, and we've come down here and we're in this section. This was this section of the Western Wall. We're on a continuation of the Western Wall, actually. You just can't see it from where we are. It's hidden behind the buildings. And from here, I'm going to leave it for Shelley to take us up into the Christian quarter.
Great. Thank you, Amy. As Amy said, we never get to hear each other guiding. We're always guiding side by side, but I'm going to share my screen again and just move on because this is where I left all of you. But we're now, wait a second for this to load up. Okay, we're now actually on the street that Amy mentioned, El Wad, which does mean the valley. And the truth of the matter is, today you don't feel it so much of the valley, but 2,000 years ago, it was a very deep valley. And I actually took this photo during COVID times. I happen to like it because it gives you just a feel of the different people who are on the street. Again, in other words, we're in the Muslim quarter, but and these might be Arab, maybe they're Christian Arab, maybe they're Muslim Arab salespeople. Sales were, shall we say, on a low point during COVID. In the back is a synagogue that is not in use. And here you can see an ultra-Orthodox Jew making his way. I'm always hoping that his eyes weren't covered so he didn't trip. But we're continuing on now on this street. And this is still the street El Wad, but what we're going to be doing now is following part of the Via Dolorosa. And I'm just going to move us up just a little bit, just to give you a sense. And the Via Dolorosa, what is the Via Dolorosa? The Via Dolorosa translates as the way of sorrow, and it commemorates the path that Jesus took from the time of the trial, when Pontius Pilate brings him out before the crowd and says, "Behold the man," and when he takes up the cross, and he'll then be marched up to Golgotha, the hill of the cross where he'll be crucified. So we're following the Via Dolorosa. In other words, it would be coming down this way. The building with the brown doorway is the Austrian Hospice. It's an Austrian foothold that has the best apple strudel anywhere. So when you come here, and if you don't feel like having hummus, you can go for that apple strudel. It's one of our tour directors' favorite spots. But back to the Via Dolorosa, it was going to be the Franciscans or the Latin Catholics who will decide that along this route there are 14 stations, each station marking a different event that they said took place during the time that Jesus is making his way. So we're not going to have time for all the stations, but we're standing now in front of station number 3. And if we move up just a little closer, you can see Roman numeral 3. And there's a chapel here. It belongs to the Armenian Catholics. And you can actually see in the stone setting telling us what took place here. And the belief is that Jesus here fell for the first of 3 times. And we're going to turn around just a bit over to here, right next to it, the 4th station, also inside an Armenian church. But if we move up just a little bit closer, just to get you in, here we go. And if you take a look at the stone sculpture above the threshold, this is where it commemorates where Jesus meets his mother, Mary. And so this is commemorated over here. And I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit. But what I want to do now is turn you around because just to give you an idea, because a large part of the Via Dolorosa is actually in the Muslim Quarter. So it's you know, and whatever, people have a little bit of a hard time getting around that. But in other words, you have the Via Dolorosa, but the Muslim Quarter was also established here. So, of course, you see all the shops and wares, and of course, tourists love coming here for shopping. Again, we give enough free time on the Tauck tours. I'm going to take us over now to just one more station, and this is the 5th station. Let's get us in a little bit closer. And it's a little blurry, but if you read the sign, we talked about street signs before. Well, the name of the street here is the Via Dolorosa. And along the Via Dolorosa, many of the stations have chapels attached to them. So I talked about 2 before, but I'd like to take you into one of the chapels. So we're going to go inside the chapel here at the 5th station. First of all, what does the 5th station commemorate? It commemorates, and this is in the New Testament, the story of a man, Simon of Cyrene, who takes up the cross from Jesus for part of the time. And below we have, this is what's called a Jerusalem cross, also called a Crusader cross. Notice 5 crosses, and there's dual symbolism in. One of them is the 5 wounds of Jesus, but in addition, the center cross is meant to symbolize Jesus, and then you have the 4 writers of the gospel, Mark, Matthew, John, and Luke. So this chapel very clearly is a Catholic chapel. Okay, because that is why you have, that is the symbol, that as a symbol, one of the symbols of the Franciscans. We're going to exit here. If we were on an actual walking tour, we'd be going out, making a left, going up the hill to the rest of the station. But we're now going to jump ahead to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, this is the main entrance, and I'm going to walk you around just the compound just to tell you that the original Church of the Holy Sepulchre was completed in 335 by Queen Helena, who was the mother, or so they say. They say she built it, not that she was the mother. She was the mother of the Emperor Constantine. And the Emperor Constantine, in the year 324, will declare Christianity as the religion for the Byzantine Empire. The church, though, that she built, the huge, massive Byzantine church, was destroyed almost in its entirety in 1009. So hence, the church that we'll be entering very shortly is, for the most part, a 12th century Crusader arch. As a matter of fact, you can see the Gothic arches at the entranceway. But I'd like to, before we go in, to show you a few photos. Now, this is a photo that I took on a Tauck tour while I was waiting for the guests, and probably took it about a year and a half ago. Maybe some of the tour directors who are watching remember this scene, because these are people waiting to go in, they are online to go into the tomb of Jesus. So they're not waiting to go actually into the church. To go into the church, you can kind of swoosh your way past them, but they are waiting to go in. This is about a year and a half ago. And as a result of COVID, this is the entrance of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today. Now, the church itself, when you go in, and some of you might have been there, is very different from probably any other church that you have visited, because it's shared by a number of denominations. So you have inside the Greek Orthodox, the Catholic, the Latin, the Roman, the Catholic, the Latins, the Armenians. And those are the three main holders of places in the church. But then you have the Coptics, and Coptics are Christians based for the most part in Egypt. You have the Ethiopians and the Syrians. And everyone has their own chapel. Some areas are shared spaces. Not only they have very defined hours of procession and mass. And this was all put together in the 19th century as part of what was called the status quo accord. So you have many different types of people who enter and pray and worship at the church. For example, this was another photo I caught of these are Franciscan brothers about to enter for a procession. But here we have church leaders, visitors from abroad. So in other words, many different groups of visitors come here. It's both, I would say, both a site for tourists, but also it is an active site for worship. So let's head inside. And we're going to be going up a few steps. I always tell our guests, they're not friendly steps. They're a bit of, they're high steps, but what I want to remind you is we're going up steps because we have now climbed a mountain. And we have climbed the mountain of Golgotha, the hill of the skull, or in Latin, Calvary. And let's just take a little bit of a walk here. There are actually two chapels here. One of them is Catholic. And I'm going to go back around, and this is Greek Orthodox, but that's not what's important. What's important here is this is believed to be the place of crucifixion. And if I head in a little bit closer, you can see on both sides there are rock. This is limestone rock. And if you were here 2,000 years ago, this is what the area would have looked like. A hilly area, rocky area. There were gardens around, and archaeologists have actually shown that there were gardens around. And the man who is here bent over, what he is doing, he's actually touching the place of the crucifixion, because they discovered a crack or a fissure in the rock, and the belief is that that is the actual place of crucifixion. So when you do come here and visit, you can actually wait online and you can touch the place of crucifixion. And if not, you can come here and just enjoy the really fabulous ambiance in the church itself. And we're going to head down the stairs. These stairs are much easier to go down. It's one way up, one way down. And we're going to head down the stairs. And this stone that you're looking at here, again, this photo was taken during COVID times. That's why there's only one person here. Is the stone is called the stone of unction or the stone of anointing. And it was here, according to tradition, Jesus is crucified above Golgotha, where we were. He's taken down the hill. He's laid out on the rock where he will be ritually purified and anointed and then wrapped in a shroud. He will then be buried in a cave, which perhaps you can see in the back of this large mosaic. And he will be given a traditional Jewish burial 2,000 years ago. We're now going to head over to what I would say the centerpiece of the church. And I have two different shots here, but this is the rotunda. And even in the original church, by the way, there was a rotunda. And some of the columns might even be going back to that period. But let's just take a look of the walk around. I'll talk about the centerpiece in a second, but I just want you to get a sense. We would have come from this direction that I'm pointing and passing an Armenian chapel. And in the back here, there is a Greek Orthodox chapel. Now, the building in the center is called the edicule, and the edicule, which means the little chapel, is the place where believed to be by many where Jesus was buried. And I just want to give you just a view also up at the beautiful skylight. This dome was redone in the year 2000, but I'm going to now, we'll take you on one more shot. Okay, again, here you can get, this is probably more of a realistic shot. You can see the people waiting in line, and sometimes the wait can be half an hour, and sometimes when it was really crowded, yes, it could be up to 2 hours. So even on our Tauck tours, people would come on their own time. And there is always a priest there at the entrance, and he allows people to go in just a couple at a time, and you are granted a total of about 2 minutes. But you can see now, by the way, this structure, which is only about 200 years old, there were structures before, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt. This one was actually renovated about a number of years ago, and originally when we went there, it was all black. They sandblasted it, and you see the beautiful, beautiful red stone. So for many people, especially for many religious Christians, this is the high point. And when you enter, okay, this is believed to be underneath here the burial place of Jesus. Now, it wouldn't have looked like that 2,000 years ago. As I mentioned, he would have been buried in a cave. That was all destroyed, but the belief is by many that he is buried here. And archaeologists, not that long ago, actually, the church was closed for a while, dug down, and they were able to reach even the ground level. They discovered crosses going back to the Byzantine period. So here is how I usually say, can we prove 100% that Jesus was buried here? No, but we have no reason to say he wasn't. There are others who place the burial place outside of the walls of the city in a place called the Garden Tomb. Again, that is one opinion, but again, the majority opinion does place it here inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And we're going to be leaving the church now, but I'd just like to say that on this tour, and we're getting near the end, we have visited not only the four quarters, but think about the holy sites that we visited: the St. James Cathedral, the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, where you had the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, and of course, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be exiting one of the gates. This is Lion's Gate, not that far from the very beginning of the Via Dolorosa. And we're going to be heading up now to the Mount of Olives. And I'm going to hand the baton over now to Amy, who's going to take us up there.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I know we're over time, everybody, so don't worry. This is literally our last stops, and we're about to head out. So we just want to show you where we've come from on the map. So this is the map that we saw earlier. So now, again, it's oriented in the same direction that we're looking at here at the Lion's Gate. That is to say that north is to the left. We started at Jaffa Gate. We came from the Armenian quarter. We did the Jewish quarter. We were on the Temple Mount, and we came up through the Muslim quarter on the Via Dolorosa, and we were in the Christian quarter. So now we're going to head out through the Lion's Gate, which is right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to head out right out towards the Kidron Valley. So the Lion's Gate is where we just came from a second ago. And we're going to head across the valley here to the Mount of Olives. And our last landing point is right up above us. And we're going to head there now. So this is literally our last thing that we wanted to show you today. And I wanted to just remind you that inside this 1 square kilometer live thousands of people who are connected to all three religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam within the four quarters. The Muslim quarter down here on the right, the Christian quarter up above, the Jewish quarter down below, and the Armenian quarter with the Dome of the Rock here. So I wanted to just leave you, here's like sort of a sunset picture over the Dome of the Rock as well, and over the entire Old City, although I think I'm going to show you this 360-degree section over here. So I'll just leave you with one last word. The Mount of Olives, where we're standing right now, is also a wonderful place. It is the site that looks from the east towards the west. This is the site that in Christian tradition where the Messiah has already come and will come again, in Jewish tradition where the Messiah will come from. And it's a bit more complicated in Islamic terms, but suffice it to say that the days of final judgment will also come and be connected to a wave from this space. So this is the place that we remember peace, that we think about peace, and that we think about the future. So I leave you with just one last sentence, which is a poem that was written by a rabbi here almost 150 years ago. And he said, "There are stones and there are stones, there are hearts and there are hearts. there are hearts that are stones, but there are stones that are hearts. And certainly these stones that are in front of you are at the heart of all that we do and all that we love. And we really hope that you'll come and join us for a real tour in person. As much fun as we're having with the virtual, we'd love to see you in person in Israel. So I'm going to stop share so that we can start with the.
Okay, I just want to end with one other word about the amount of olives. I do hope, again, as Amy said, that you'll be able to join us live on one of our tours as soon as tourism opens up. Things are starting to look hopeful, so we hope we'll be able to see you here. I just want to point out what we did in a little bit over an hour, we would normally do in about 2 days, but don't worry, with a lot of breaks and a lot of food stuff, because of course we have amazing food here. I'd like to end also with a sentence. In Jewish tradition, we frequently say, and certainly twice a year, if to wish people Lishana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim, which is next year in Jerusalem. We say it at the very end of the Passover meal, the Seder, which is coming up around the corner. And I'd also like to wish people, for everybody who's celebrating, either a wonderful Passover, a happy Easter, and a Ramadan Kareem, because these all fall out on around the same time. So we look forward to seeing you, and a big shout hi to all our wonderful tour directors.
Thank you so much, Amy and Shelley. That was fantastic. Really awesome, incredible views and education. I know we're pretty well over time, so I will ask just one question. It's very specific, but a lot of people had this question earlier on of why there was the Jewish star in the Armenian church. So I don't know if Amy or Shelley can answer just that one, and then for the rest of the questions that have come in, hopefully Amy and Shelley have answered them throughout. I think they did a pretty good job of doing that. But if not, I'll record them and see if we can get some written answers for you all.
Okay, the truth of the matter is, what we call a Jewish star is really an ancient symbol. It's only going to be adopted in the 17th century as a Jewish star, or then known as the Star of David. So it's in the middle of our flag, but hence, in many respects, the candelabrum is much more of an ancient symbol. I don't know, Amy, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that was good. Dustin, we're okay with answering another question or two if you want. We got a couple that sort of came up a couple of times about the amount of people in the city. So I'll just say
sure.
That it depends on who you ask, but there's somewhere between 35,000 and 40,000 people that live in the old city. And that there's no rules about who has to live where. It's just by tradition and who has money to pay for an apartment in a particular place. And people move freely around the city. So there's no issues about coming or walking around or being in the city, and we really hope that you'll come and experience it with us.
And just to put it in perspective, in terms of all of Jerusalem, this is, in terms of population, just a little tiny part of Jerusalem, because we have over 900,000 people who live in Jerusalem, but that's in the various parts of the new part of the city.
Thank you. Really appreciate it again. Your time today. I'm just going to show one last slide for everyone as I close. Okay, so thank you again. If you would like more information about our tours to Israel and Jordan and our other exotics journeys, please visit us on Tauck.com. And to review recordings of previous insideTauck live webinars, you can visit us on our blog page, The Taucker. The link is right there. And we do appreciate Amy and Shelley's time, and as well as Kelly, who came on to introduce them as well. So thank you all. We appreciate you as so much, and hopefully we're going to get back out on the road very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.